Wow, sorry for all that distortion and craziness, but with the build up and drop from Voltage Vibes, there's always a party going on. Voltage Vibes, a pretty interesting Belgian manufacturer of eurorack. Most of their modules are pretty utilitarian. A pretty simple concept, but it can do so much expressive things. It is a fader and an arcade button, and the way they work together is pretty interesting. So in this patch I was using the North drum, triggered by the grids from Mutual Instruments, and the fader is adding some control voltages so that the sequence that is generated by the grids is getting more complex and more complex the higher the fader goes. When you press the arcade button, then the fader kind of drops, then the signal is interrupted. This arcade button, you can latch it, you can just use it as a temporary gate signal or trigger signal. There are multiple gate and trigger signal outputs, also a CV input. If nothing is plugged in, you generate a voltage. You have a normal mode and an inversed mode. In the inversed mode you actually turn the fader around and the knob will kind of act a little bit different than in normal mode. And you got a range, 10 volt or 5 volt range, which can be very handy. So it's a pretty simple concept with a fader and an arcade button. It's magical when they work together. So you're actually building up, and then you can do a drop, or you can do a kind of a stutter effect that I really like to do, because then you're adding some to the performance. So with a DJ mixer you can add volume. Like with this build up and drop, with the fader you add some control voltage, which can of course be sent to a VCA to open the VCA like a mixer, add some volume to a sound, or any other kind of control voltage input you have in your system. You can of course mold this to various destinations, and I think that's when the magic happens. You take these multiple signals and send it all over your eurorack modular, and you do a lot of things with only this fader. Then you can really have a performance. At the same time, if you invert one of these molds, you can also close other things. With the arcade button you can start sequences. If you send it to a voltage controlled switch, you can switch between two sequences. So you can use this to do a break with a variation on the melody you programmed on a different sequencer, and you just switch between the two. I'm also doing this. I'm using this build up and drop to switch between different filter outputs. I'm also using that to switch between two different sequences. And with the fader and with the button, I'm also controlling the sequencer length. So you can get a really organic performance. And like I just showed, you can go pretty brutal with it. It's a really nice laid out module. You have everything here. You can really play with it. It's built really well. It's a sturdy arcade button. You can press it, it won't break. Just one thing I want to mention. I got the blanking panels. I wouldn't call them blanking panels. They have holes in them. They're so convenient because you don't want those cables dangling if you're using the module upright. So these come really in handy. I just go inside of the modular, then come out of the modular, and these cables will be really nice and tight. Also, when you need to route cables inside of the modular, or you want to clean up your modular and have connections that always stay connected, but you don't like all these cables still dangling around, then you can use two of them in your system and just route those cables behind the other modules. I think they're extremely convenient, and yeah, it's a brilliant idea. Back to the module. Let's go over all the inputs, outputs, the controls and switches. here we have the CV input. You can use a control voltage, you can send it to the CV in. It will bypass the control voltage generated at the fader. It will directly go to the bud out, the build-up and drop output, which is not attenuated or offset by any parameter. It is only interrupted when you press the arcade button. Then you got the trig press and trig release. Trig press is a trigger that is sent out when you press the arcade button. The trig release is a trigger that gets sent out when you release the arcade button. Then you got the gate drop. This is a continuous gate, but it is interrupted when you press the arcade button. Then you got the inversed gate drop, which is a gate that is sent out when you push the arcade button. Then you got the BUD out, the build-up and drop output. The output is not attenuated in any way. It is only interrupted when you press the arcade button. And then you got the attenuation out, which attenuates the signal coming into the CV in or the signal from the fader. And you can attenuate it by these two knobs, which we will have a look at in a minute. Then we got the switches. We got the normal and inversed switch. In normal mode, you add control voltage by pushing the fader upwards. In inversed mode, you actually do the opposite. There's no voltage when it's up here, and you add voltage by pushing it down. The button is not flipped, not switched. It will also interrupt the signal when it is pressed. So it gives kind of a different flavor, like this. 10 volt, 5 volt. I must say the BUD, bud out, it always is 10 volt, so 0 to 10 volt. It's not attenuated in any way. It's also 10 volt when this is switched to 5 volt. But the attenuation output, where the attenuation and the offset takes place, when you switch it to 5 volt, you get a range that is half as wide as when it's in 10 volt. So then it's from 0 to 5 volt. Of course, when you have a full amount and no offset, then it is 0 to 5 volt. Of course, when you attenuate the signal, then it is less, and when you offset the signal, it will still be 5 volt, but it will start at a different point. You got the press and release, but this only works together with latch. So in latch mode, you press the arcade button, it latches on and it stays lit, or the signal stays interrupted. When you press it again, then it unlatches. In bypass mode, it only interrupts when you press the arcade button. Let's go again to latch mode. Then the press and release will work. And the press means that if you press, it will directly latch. If you press again, it will directly release. In release mode, if you press, it won't do anything until you releases it, then it will latch. And again, for when you want to unlatch, you press it, and on release it unlatches. We got the amount and the offset, two knobs, they're controls, and when you use the attenuator output, then you attenuate the signal generated by the fader. The amount from 0 to hero, hero is 100%, not attenuated at all. 0 is 0, you don't get any voltage when using that fader. Then we go to the offset, no offset in the middle, so at 0. Then counterclockwise you go into the negative and clockwise into the positive. You got the fader, which is a high quality fader. It has a nice travel to it, and yeah, it feels very, very nicely built. It has some resistance, which I like. It feels nice, and it doesn't stop me from quickly flipping that fader down again to kind of do a DJ stop like this, it really feels high quality. Then you got the arcade button. The arcade button also has some resistance, so it's not feeling flimsy at all. It is really well built. It feels like it will last a long time. When it ever decides to not last anymore, you can easily switch it because it's just a regular arcade button. So you can just use another arcade button or a change part. And it lights up when you send out a gate or trigger or you interrupt the CV signal. Let's go over another patch. I will create a simple patch so you can really follow how it actually works. Really simple. I'm using the gate drop output to the mapping of the grids, which changes the rhythm, and the attenuated output is going to all 3 rhythm generators of the grids, which is then also triggering the North drum. It is in inversed mode, so no CV when up here. I put it in 5 volt, so the range is not that extreme. On press and bypass, that doesn't matter too much, but let's have a listen at this patch. The sequence is already running, and when I change the offset, you get a few triggers because all the knobs on the grids are down, but I'm giving it a little bit voltage because I'm offsetting it to the positive, so they're already starting. And when I move this down, I'm adding notes, rhythm triggers, because the grids is like getting a higher CV voltage. Almost all the way up. Then I can get that change in rhythm. But what I can also do so I'm getting it more of a slow rhythm, and then I'm doing that change, and I'm going back. Can also latch it. And on release. I can switch it, then this becomes low voltage. And then it works differently because when I interrupt this signal, then the CV, it drops like this, but when I inverse it, then the CV stays high. Because it's inversed, then it actually drops kind of, but it stays high. It's really weird. It's really not easy to explain, but it's the way it works. So that's normal and inversed. It only has some effects on the fader. It doesn't inverse the way this knob works. So you get different kind of ways to work with the module by switching it in to normal which makes it an extremely nice performance tool because you have these combinations and you can easily switch between them. So I really like that. So now I'm making a quicker rhythm and a change of pattern. I think that is really interesting. You can control so much with it. There's CV signals, so everything that has a CV input is a potential destination. So I think this is an amazing module. Please give it a try, check it out for performance. It is amazing, even when you just like controlling stuff. If you have a filter and it has a little knob and you want a nicer control over that filter, you can use this build up and drop to open up that filter and have a way nicer experience than searching between cables and turning knobs. So this is an extremely nice way to make use of other stuff in your modular system. I'm going to use it a lot in my performances. And yeah, I really adore this module. Big shouts out to Voltage Vibes for creating such an amazing performance tool. I really like their concepts. They try to keep it pretty simple, but what you can do with this is much more than something simple. You really have to figure out how you can use it to have a really nice performance. So many possibilities. I might in the future make a video on exploring all the possibilities you can have with this build up and drop. So please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, become my Patreon. I have a Patreon page where I share patches and where you can support me. That would mean so much to me. And yeah, hope to see you next time. I've got another patch, and with the build up and drop from Voltage Vibes, I'm now controlling the flex shaper from Clavis, on which I recently did a video. Please check that out. And also controlling the post lawsuit filter from STG Sound Labs. I'm controlling the mutable instruments grids, which is triggering the North drum. And let's see how this all works together in a nice way. It's a more gentle patch, this one. Still a little bit distortion, but it's more gentle. But it can go pretty nasty. I'm closing the filter and I'm adding rhythms, adding triggers to the grids. I'm closing down the filter. It gets really dark. Now I'm adding some resonance. really nice. So that is pretty interesting, I would say. I hope you found this interesting too. Please leave a comment what you think about this module. Is it something you want in your system? Please let me know. And yeah, thank you for watching. Bye bye.